Welcome
Yeah,
back,
no worries.
everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, Who Am I? Today, my guest is Arisendead, a streamer on Twitch. I found him there because I enjoy watching Super Mario streamers pretty much every day. And so, welcome to the show, Arisen. Um, I don't want to know exactly where you live, but which state do you live in?
I live in Colorado, Southeast Colorado, the
Okay.
farming flat part. There's not the mountains and all the cool stuff where everybody else lives.
And let's see what else I know about you. You have one daughter, right?
Yep. Yep. I
Sometimes
have a
talk about her.
13-year-old. Yep. I have a 13-year-old daughter. Her mom passed away a little over a year ago. Now a single father, um, raising her through all of this societal world that we live in and all of the issues that come with it.
Right. Yeah, it must be a challenge. I am single, so I don't know what that's like. Um, I thought I would get in touch with you because I like the kinds of topics you talk about during your stream. I think it's interesting either way how streamers are able to talk and entertain their audience while they're playing the game, even if it's intense.
Mhm.
How's that? How do you manage to split your attention that way?
I actually let my subconscious rattle off, which is what a lot of the times is what people are hearing. Is they're just hearing my outward theorized thoughts and what I'm thinking about in the moment or what I'm trying to figure out. I'm using that as a way to distract myself so that I can keep in that rhythmic tune with my hands while playing the game. Because different portions of my brain stop me and don't allow me to have the focus of what I need or I'm not paying attention. But whenever I'm talking about these deep conversations, there is no answers to them, and I could talk forever and just theorize about essentially what I call nonsense. And so it's a good way to distract my brain from the issues that I'm having and just get past those issues because of my neurological disorders.
Sometimes you go back and forth between speaking or muting your mic. So what does that change for your gameplay?
Um, Muting my mic is usually because I can't stay focused enough to get started, or I'm disassociating like crazy. Because I played this game for 3 years and I'm very ADHD, so I don't get no dopamine from this game. I don't get no stimulus
Hmm.
from this game. It's more of a mental health tool for me over the
Uh-huh.
years as I've used it to push myself and my boundaries because this game will piss me off very, very quickly, very, very angrily. I have bipolar disorder and ADHD, so chasing that anger and learning to control that and be positive while playing something and being completely like destimulated when my brain is searching for stimulus and gaining the control over that is kind of what
Hmm.
I've been using the game for as of the last couple of years.
Interesting. I've done something similar. There are phases when I'm down, when I can't focus on anything, can't work, and then I want to test myself to see do I get angry easily with disappointment and things not going my way. And yeah, playing games has been one method for to do that. Um,
Oh, it's a great way. It's been very helpful for me because I have to be able to see and like make it click in my head my own behaviors. I can pinpoint somebody else's behaviors. Also have 10 years as an Alzheimer's CNA, so I'm really good with working with learning people's patterns and behaviors. I had to predict because their brain is shrinking and they don't have their memories anymore. And I have to keep them from walking out of their wheelchairs and things like that. So I had to predict what they would do ahead of time. And it's been very, very helpful for that specific sense, at least for me.
have you always worked in the medical sector?
I got into the medical sector after like I started when I was 13. Before that, I was doing anything and everything, kind of like my daughter, to be an mini entrepreneur. By the like, I think I was 10 years old and I was selling popsicles during the summer for 10 cents a piece. It cost like $3 for a box for 1,000.
Mhm.
And I was making a lot of money selling these popsicles to all the neighbor kids for 10 cents a piece. But by the time I got to be 13, the first legal job I can get was janitorial aide at school. So then I did that. And then I went to farm work. And then I went to fast food. Then I went to oil field. Then I went to medical.
Right.
And that's where I've been for the last 10 years as in medical. And I absolutely loved it before COVID hit. Then I had a mental breakdown and I had to quit. That's why I'm no longer working as a CNA,
What does CNA stand for?
certified nursing assistant.
Okay.
I'd be the caretaker of the residents as compared to I didn't give them their pills like the nurses do. Um, in a residential home, the nurses do a lot of paperwork, but the CNA do all the grunt work, all the back work. Like
Mhm.
grandma or grandpa needs to go to the bathroom. That'd be me. Making sure grandpa's entertained, having something to do, talking with them, communicating with them, giving them their activities of daily living in a positive, healthy way so that they can be happy through their time in our home. That's what I would do. Report
You
to the nurse anything that was important.
you still have grandparents? Do you still do that kind of work
Nope,
with
my
family?
grandparents finally just all passed away.
Yeah, yeah,
My
mine
last
as
two
well.
very recently.
Mine as well, but you just reminded me of the time with them and the kinds of things I could learn from interacting with them. It's very nice.
Yeah, I wish I could interact with my grandma. I really do. On this level that I am now, I didn't used to be at the awareness level that I am. And sometimes you kind of go, oh, oof, wish I'd have paid more attention, but that's life.
You mentioned once that it's been difficult for you to keep a job in general, I think. Um, I don't remember the context, but is can you talk more
When it
about that?
when it comes to basic jobs, and I don't mean to say this in a negative aspect because every job is important in society for like going to the grocery store and the things like that. But I can't work like a cashier register job. I can't deal with the interaction with people because of my bipolar disorder, where people are going to be rude, or I have to deal with people who are going to be negative in any kind of context because of my bullying throughout my entire life, the systematic issues that I had with being stereotyped by the police department and people of power for things that weren't actually me, but because of my ADHD behaviors and not having diagnoses properly in the 2000s and whatnot, and growing up in that time in a small town, um, I got labeled a lot of things that I wasn't. So now I have an issue with people. Finally, at 33 this year, um, I had finally set boundaries in my life for the first time and stopped people pleasing
Mhm.
and learned how to, after a year of already having that mental breakdown, learn how to finally do what most people learn when they're in middle school, if that makes sense. Like I definitely missed some serious things because of the trauma that I had in my childhood and my upbringing that I'm learning now as an adult and I'm finding through my own introspection.
Okay, I can recognize some of those things in my own life. For example, I hate power hierarchies and people believing that they can decide something for me just because
Yeah,
of
me
their
too.
rank in a job. I want, whenever I do work with people, I drop all titles and just call everyone by their first name. And well, if it's possible, sometimes they insist on that kind of rank being respected. But yeah, I haven't been in trouble with police or anything like that, but I also feel uncomfortable very quickly in a job. And so now I'm trying to learn how to become an entrepreneur. And I have had this desire for a few years now, but there are always mental blocks that keep me from making it real, making it work.
Mhm.
I I'm good I'm good at things in theory. I mean, when I'm not dealing with people, when it's just on paper, I can manage my own finances and stuff like that. But when I need to register things with an office, that's one thing that easily
That
triggers me.
that's 100% right there with you too. That's why, like, for example, I have till the 20th before I have to contact over past child support that I owe for my son. And I haven't because of it being the same people who harass me and the system and the people that I know who are just out to they have stereotyped me and just think that I'm this horrible person that I moved away from. Like I literally got out of my town, partially because of all of that harassment and everything that was going on, um, back at the time whenever I lived there. And this is who I have to contact and work with. And that CPTSD has literally stopped me hardcore from like even wanting to attempt. Like I've been putting it off till the very, very last minute because I'm like terrified
Mhm.
subconsciously. And I have that mental block as well, which is something that I also deal with. There's just certain mental blocks there's very important things in my life that I need to take care of, but I can't. Like I'm just incapable of doing them sometimes. And I find that that's a big reason why I like to try to introspect and understand myself. Because the more I understand myself and then eventually make something click, I can say, okay, well, I don't like that.
You just mentioned CPTSD, and you're actually the first person I heard that term from. So I looked it up when you talked about it a while back. It stands for complex post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Yeah.
And what makes it complex is it that a whole civilization is involved?
Um, what makes it complex is a lot of people have CPTSD and they don't realize it. It's a different form of CPTSD. But what makes it complex is when somebody has PTSD, like somebody from the military or somebody coming back from war, they have flashbacks, visual flashbacks. They'll run it back through their mind. And I've been able to experience a little bit of PTSD because not that it's a good thing, but I've healed and worked past it, of course. Now, that's the reason why it's so easy to talk about. But when my daughter's mom died, I was on scene and I watched her die. Like I knew something was wrong. I had this feeling, like I could just feel emotion and energy. I heard the sirens and everything else, and we got in the car and I booked it because I knew in that moment it was going to happen. I knew that that's what it was. And so I was there. And so for the first few months, I would run that video back up in my head.
Mhm.
But I have aphantasia. So I don't actually have the ability willfully to visualize and see imagery in my head. So the complex part of it is my body feels the anxiety, the something's wrong, the terrifiedness, the scared, the fight or flight response, but my brain doesn't understand what's happening because I'm missing the picture. So I don't have the connection between it. And
Mm,
so so that's why it's complex.
I see. Yeah, I've heard you talk about aphantasia before. I can't imagine what that's like. So you don't see, but you feel the the trauma again. Is that right?
Yes, like I don't remember it because I disassociated it when I was younger. So those memories don't come back to me in that sense. And I also don't visualize things in my head or run those kinds of things unless I'm in a fight or flight panic moment, like life or death. When I'm in those moments, then my brain can sort of, I guess you can say, visualize, but I'll run through like 50 scenarios in a moment in the span of like 3 or 4 seconds and know what to do in that moment, like, and just do it. I'll be in the
Mm,
back of my head. I don't know how to explain it. My subconscious takes over and it's like, nope, this is what needs done. And it just, all of my knowledge, all of the access of everything I've ever had, like I'm able to utilize it. And something takes over me, if you want to call it that. I do exactly what I need. And that's why I've got protection orders for disarming people with weapons in public. And I've worked in the oil field and had a lot of instances and situations where I could have easily died. Been through a lot of those crazy type situations where most people, and I don't mean to say this in a cocky or an egotistical way, but most people's brains, they wouldn't have reacted or done what I did. And unless you did what I did, you wouldn't have been okay and it wouldn't have been a good environment and something negative would have definitely happened. Like
mm.
I've fallen 15 foot down a hole that went all the way down to 45 feet. Like everybody thought I was dead.
Yeah.
I should have been, but I panicked, elbowed, kneed my way up that 15 foot or however far I fell down and somehow like before the chain hand on the top of the rig. And it was oh, probably 50 feet to, yeah, 50 feet up off the ground. The chain hand was trying to get a chain down there to put it down there to help me out. And I was crawling myself out by the time he got from the deck or the top to the bottom where that hole was. Ironically, I was asking for mouse hole covers and bitching about it, but nobody listened. They got it the
Wow.
next day. It was there immediately. They got a welder real quick after that one. But
So the brain and the subconscious do things to protect us from dying, for example, and in that way, it's really good. But they can also do things that are counterproductive in the long run, right?
mm, that's what I deal with a lot too. I have a lot of self-sabotage and fighting the conscious and subconscious portions of my brain as I like to differentiate them.
So, what is an example where the brain has learned something from some difficult situation, maybe in childhood, and has this automatic program ready to trigger when you're in a similar situation or one that you perceive to be similar, but actually, as an adult, it would be better to, I don't know, talk to someone rather than, instinctively react. Do you know what I'm talking
Mm,
about?
yeah, Like a situation that you learned as a child that caused you trauma, and then as an adult you're experiencing again.
Yeah,
But you don't need to react as negatively or as severe on the spectrum of doubt and worry as compared to being able to handle and tolerate it more. I'm assuming, is that what you mean?
exactly. Yeah, I think this is one way to.
Paying the bills, going to that place that you said that you don't like to go, that I don't like to go.
Mhm.
It's the perfect one to talk about because we don't we don't need to feel awkward in public. We don't need to feel socially um inept essentially, and not having the confidence of being able to go out in public and not worry about people's thoughts of, oh, this person's weird, or not knowing what to do, or our hands being in the wrong spot, or me moving around, just referring to neurodivergent people in general. We stem in different ways and we do different things. Um, we shouldn't worry about doing those kinds of things because we already know what to do. Everybody in society, it's been very simple for a long time. It's don't talk to anybody, keep to yourself, stay still, be quiet, sit down, shut up, listen. Get through the line, get through the task, get through the thing, and it's over and it's done, and we don't have any anxiety over it because we don't have to. A lot of people are used to doing that routine from when we were taught, which in schools, especially in the millennial range, you were taught to sit down, shut up, and listen. Like that's what you would be told from the time we were going through elementary school. Our parents were very different with their raising, especially as compared to how we raise our kids, at least hopefully how I hope a lot of millennials raise their kids, because um, we used to have to be like, oh, if we made mom or dad mad and we did something they said not to do, we might not get dinner. We might not eat. We might
Mhm.
lose everything in our room. We might get spanked. We might get grounded for 2 weeks. We might get forced to go have to work and fix the car. Like we didn't even know. It's just whatever our parents did. They made sure it was very negative so that we didn't do it again. And a lot of I feel millennials had that rough parenting, or the parents were too busy working to where they didn't have the parenting like they should have. And that's a different set of millennials and how um different subgroups of millennials, I guess, work and behavior wise, if that makes sense. I don't know how to explain that very well.
Um, yeah, you said problems get passed on from generation to generation, and what what do you try to do differently to break the cycle with your child?
I try to remember my childhood. I try to remember my issues, my struggles, and whenever I can figure them out and associate them, I try to ensure that I don't do things that correspond to what were done to me to my daughter. That's why I raise my daughter very differently. Um, I'll still use punishments and things like that. I don't spank her. I'll intentionally raise my voice and have tone progression, but I'll tell her ahead of time that I'm doing this intentionally. I'll say, I
Mhm.
am trying to get you upset. I am trying to help you remember. I am trying to make you feel bad because I want you to remember. It's not because I'm trying to be controlling you or manipulating you, but for this precise moment, it's like when you were pushed into the pool to learn how to swim. For some people, that's how they needed to
Mhm.
learn. They needed that push. Other people, you pushed them into the pool, they almost drowned, and now they're terrified of water for the rest of their life and they don't get to experience swimming. I try to find what works with my child, and I let her know what I'm doing so that she's aware that I'm not manipulating her or narcissistically programming her in a way, because she's very aware that she's her own person. And I tell her all the time that in the end, only you can make your decision. Doesn't matter how much I want you to do something, et cetera, and how much I tell you. You have to make the decision. If you decide not to make it for whatever reason, some of the things I'm trying to teach you in life will, the consequences are you can't come back from. And so that's why I try to keep her aware and open-minded, and I make sure I explain things while I do them and explain pain, stimulus, or ways to make better memories. And I want you to remember these things so that you don't forget because you're in la la land, you're in subconscious, you're worried about your TV shows, you're playing your games, you're not being mindful. These are, of course not, she's 13. It's like you're living your life, but you do need to be aware instead of being so inner subconscious all the time, just living life stream society, how we all were when we were kids. Everything we thought that was important, we were actually not really important whatsoever in life. But it was the whole world to us back then.
You're trying to keep her safe because you're aware of the dangers that are around,
Yes.
and
Yep.
she probably just sees it as you trying to boss her around and restrict her freedom.
Yep. And that's exactly why I explain things to her and I talk to her about things constantly and so openly. Like we have a very open dialogue. She doesn't hide things from me. If she messes up, she comes and talks to me, etc.
Right? Your daughter is also limited. I mean, also has mental illness issues, right?
She has ADHD. It's not been technically diagnosed, but it's definitely she has ADHD. And she has the likelihood of her not being bipolar as her
Mm.
and her mom, or myself and her mom as well, or bipolar is like unlikely. So I'm positive that she's ADHD and bipolar.
And
But
so
I don't have
how
the
do you adapt?
technical clinical diagnosis for it
How do you adapt your parenting style to that?
by learning more about myself because I
Hmm.
really started diving deep into understanding ADHD and my bipolar disorder 2020 when I had my mental breakdown. Had to figure out what was wrong with my brain. I could no longer function. I didn't know why. And for the first time in since I was essentially a teen, um, had thoughts of committing suicide again. And I had gotten past that and gotten through that time in my childhood, had already made a few attempts, um, survived my attempts. And so because of that, it scared me. And I was like, I have to get help. And that was when, and
Hmm.
what actually pushed me to the edge of going to my daughter's mom, who was a nurse before she had passed away, um, to help me get started with the process of going to the doctor, getting the appointment set up. Like she literally made my appointments for me for the first couple of appointments because I couldn't do it. All I had to do was show up and then deal with my anxiety, deal with the talk and the conversation. I yelled at my doctor the first time for 45 minutes. She'll never forgive me because I needed to be taken seriously.
Right? You mentioned a mental breakdown, and I've had one or two of those as well. Maybe not with the intensity that you mentioned, but it also kind of shook me to the point that I thought, okay, the method I've been trying so far isn't working enough, so I need help from another source,
Mhm.
or I can't be as independent right now as I would have liked to, something like that. Is it similar? So I've never dealt with substance addiction, but I wonder if it's similar to hitting rock bottom and you realize that you need professional help to get out of this cycle of addiction.
I think that mental health wise, because we weren't taught about it, it wasn't taken seriously. Like, of course, if you were privileged and you happened to be like the child or lived in a small community or an area of one of those specialists, one of those doctors, one of the psychologists, but when things were actually being taken, everything starts off small and then it grows as society gets bigger. But for the most part, the amount of psychologists and clinical neurologists and everything out there does not cover the needs of it's not until more recently, it was not normalized in society to see a therapist for the everyday
Right.
person. Like people weren't aware that, look, we all have issues. We are all screwed up. We have all been living these fake lives that we don't realize that we're living until they break. COVID, like I said, gave everybody a dose of ADHD and everybody in the world stopped in that moment. Society completely took a break and everybody freaked out and everybody panicked. This is why we had all of the issues that we had when it came to the society points, because everybody's subconscious day-to-day 9 to 5 routines were instantly abruptly changed like that. And that caused all of the mental health issues that people were using for coping mechanisms, like, oh, go to the bar with my buddies on Friday, have a couple beers and shoot some pool. Can't do that now. Stuck at home with the wife and kids. Kids are cranky, wife's cranky. You no longer got your day away. This normal person or this other male in a family structure is now dealing with the fact that they're upset that they don't get to go do the thing that helps them de-stress and they're not realizing it. You know what I mean? Everybody lost those coping mechanisms and had to adjust and adapt. I feel it's more normalized now that people should be seeing mental health and getting your mental health taken care of, but until then there wasn't any. And I think that was a big issue.
You mentioned you were in a old folks home or some similar clinic when COVID started, and people started freaking out, or how did your crash come about?
Um, Do you mean what caused me to crash, or
Yeah, yeah.
the aspects of society and what caused society to crash?
What caused you personally to crash?
Um, After a while, the rules, regulations didn't make sense logically anymore for the
Mhm,
task at hand and what was needing to be done. It eventually got to the point where I was not taking care of my residents. I was impeding my residents and I was keeping them from being able to have their rights. Being forced to do a job that took away my residents' rights, even though they didn't say that publicly and they didn't want to admit to that publicly, with the regulations and everything because of COVID, trying to force people in their rooms, force masks on them, et cetera, et cetera. I worked in an Alzheimer's unit. It was a locked unit. I literally took away my residents' rights because I was told
mhm,
that I had to, from fear and threat of not getting funding for our rural hospital, so our admin's freaking out to the people at the top sending down the orders all the way through. Eventually, my brain just couldn't do it anymore. And I got put into a lockdown situation where everybody was quarantined. And I was working with FEMA nurses that came in. I was working with random people all the time. And I was the only person that didn't get COVID. And I
mhm,
refused to get vaccinated. And I was always reliant upon my immune system. I've been that way for a long time. Like, I don't even like to take the flu shot
mhm,
because it always just makes me get sick. And I don't feel like it's doing me any good. So, um, but because of that and all of the pressure, constantly everywhere of being like pressured to do something that I've already made clear to people that I didn't want to do, something that was against my nature and against my free judgment and my free will, because I had my own concerns, because my brain is neurodivergent enough as it is. And I know that it says a lot of places that it's false information, a lot of places that it says it's not false information, but there is linkages towards vaccinations and autism and ADHD, and the foods that we eat and the processing chemicals that we have. And of course, big corporations wouldn't want to, let people know about these things. So they would make sure that they tried to hide them like they always have done. They don't want to admit to their mistakes. Instead, they want to cover them up so they can keep good PR. So I don't know the effects of those kinds of things, and I made a choice not to. And the pressure of that, the quarantine, and the being forced to just, you know, not allow my residents to interact and go talk and move on their own and go do what they usually do and change their entire routine, which with an Alzheimer's patient is you can't mess up their routine.
mhm,
I'd worked with years for some of these people, and I had a lot of these people. I had helped them train a routine, even though they weren't all there logically, they still were able to subconsciously learn this is what we do, this is how we do it. And eventually I would become a professional liar, is what I used to say. And I'd be like, oh, I'm John from down the street. We got to go work on the truck. Like I'm taking somebody to the bathroom. And if we don't get that part, you know what that part number was while I'm helping them go so that they're not aware of the moment their brain is occupied, but they're used to doing it. So then they're helping me go through those situations. But yeah, COVID just, it was a lot of things all at once alongside just a lack of understanding myself in certain areas that I needed to understand. And so I had a bipolar episode multiple times, manic episodes multiple times, didn't know what they were. Anxiety attacks so bad that um I thought I was gonna die. Eventually I had to finally say I'm not gonna be able to take care of my patients with the way that I'm being affected and how I am at work. I have to give you my 2 weeks, and this
mhm.
is it. This is the end for me.
Yeah. You just mentioned lots of interesting things that I could go into, but mainly I'm interested in your opinion on who who drinks the Kool-Aid and who doesn't. What does it depend on whether you believe the COVID narrative and go along with these irrational mandates, and who manages to see through the illusion and realize it's a power grab by health organizations and governments.
Ah, the forbidden question. The forbidden question. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I think it depends on your experience in life and what you consider to be reality. I've gone through a lot of trauma. I was bullied as a kid. I was made fun of. I had impairments. I had neurological issues. I'm neurodivergent. Society doesn't conform to the standards and the normality of what I feel and how my brain functions and how I am as a person. It failed me. 100%. I was the minority that got stomped on, trampled on, looked down upon, etc., etc. And it's because I was different and they didn't understand. And in society, when you're different than the norm and the collective of society, well, society becomes afraid. And because of people being afraid essentially of me and my behaviors that had been stereotyped into my ADHD, for example, being sketchy, criminal, suspicious. These are all things that law enforcement used against me that caused me CPTSD and caused me issues to literally almost have an anxiety attack when I would hear police sirens go off or see red and blue flashing lights in the background because of how many times I would be pulled over or harassed because of my ADHD behaviors. When I wasn't doing the stereotypical things they were accusing me of, but they were determined to to figure out what I was doing. They thought I was a criminal mastermind because I wasn't doing anything, but my behaviors were the same as what they were taught in their trained school to look upon for somebody who is smoking crack. It's like they're moving around, they're twitchy, they're talking a lot. I info dump a lot, I have a lot of energy. That's not normal. So that scares people, and you get labeled and separated essentially. I think that all of my experience through all of that has caused me to maintain my logical, critical thought because of my fight or flight experiences in society. So every societal aspect or every societal interaction that I go with, I weigh the ups or the downs. Is this worth it? Do I need to do this? Do I want to go do this? Is there anything that I'm going to get out of this? Is there a logical reason for me to do this, or is this just an opportunity for someone to hurt me? Because my entire life I've dealt with people being manipulative and narcissistic and using my empathy and my kindness, turn it around on me and hurt me. So I think because of my understanding of that, I'm a little bit more cautious and a little bit more aware. I
Yeah.
question the different things that I've been taught as compared to the group of society feels comfortable and are privileged to not have dealt with all of the experiences that I've dealt with. So therefore they don't have the such extreme irrational views and possibilities that are plausible um, to where they just don't realize. Like it's just mind-boggling because it's just so much information. And the narrative of COVID, depending on what side that you view it, you look at it from one side and you think that's the worst thing that could ever happen in the world. Like there's no way that this could possibly happen. There's no way that these things are happening for what people suggest that it is. I'm not going to go into details in it, but and then there's the other side that is like, yep, they're a quack. Like there's no way they could do it because they feel that way. But when it's really happening, and it's just so mind-boggling and people just don't know how to handle that. I think it's easier just to stay with that group, like I said, huddled up when there's a group of people who think different from the COVID narrative. It used to be a smaller group. That group has been growing massively over the years. Now it's probably at least 50-50, I'm sure. Like I'm sure it's at least balanced out because of everything that we've gone through and experienced and all the information that was supposedly factual being ill factual. And we're going, what were you telling me on the news? What do you mean that's not true? What do you mean that's not true? What do you mean that's not true? They're all backtracking all of the information now and they're putting it out there. But they only put it out there for a little bit because they don't want to admit to the mess up or the fault. Like there's a lot of money to be made. So whether it be from the corporate aspect side or whatnot, like the people who have stocks and everything into these pharmaceutical companies, of course, want the vaccine to be rolled out to as many people as possible. That'll make their paychecks go up. Um, so there's going to be negative and positive to both sides, and there's going to be the lack of being able to understand because of lack of experience, and the lack of understanding because of experience, if that makes sense. Do you know what I'm trying to get at? It's
Mm,
very, very complicated. Like because of people, and you originally just had asked me if COVID was who drank the Kool-Aid, like who's right, like of the COVID narrative, like which one's right, which one's ill correct.
yeah.
And the large group was obviously the people who thought that COVID was a fierce threat and we needed to get vaccinated. And I myself dealt with people saying that I should die because I chose not to get vaccinated. Then you had the other smaller group of people who were, like I said, logically thinking, no, I don't think so, because this is impeding this, and this. We let this happen, then this could happen. Logically, critically thinking about the steps of what will happen if, you know, they said, okay, let's go ahead and do this. They made a choice and they chose not to, and then people rebelled against them. So it's just a complicated situation in general, honestly. It's a really hard
Yeah.
question to answer.
I
Everything
believe,
in my personal life, just to finish off real quick, everything in my personal life when it comes to my beliefs and whatnot, I hadn't mentioned this yet, but I'm agnostic with everything. I look at the plausibilities, the possibilities. I do my own research. I look into things. I look into like deeply, and I see, is this logical? Is this a possibility? Is this a timeline that could happen? And then I try to give it a percentage in my head, if that makes sense. Like, what's more plausible, this side or this side? And I think about it before I make a final decision and go, nah, I think I'll stay away from that, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense. It sounds very rational. I think a lot of people believe they're rational, but they're not, and they're not even aware of most of their decision-making process.
Oh, no, not at all. I agree with that.
I I got pretty first. I didn't want to look into COVID. I didn't care enough about it. I just thought, oh, you're all crazy. Leave me alone. Then I was kind of forced to because the question of the vaccine came up, and then towards the end, I got a bit afraid when politicians were saying we're going to mandate the vaccines in Germany and surrounding countries. And a friend of mine helped me realize it's not realistic, even if they did come out with that to actually implement that. But I still got afraid, and I felt the need to escape and move to another country, but that didn't work out. I but I learned
Yeah,
a lot.
unfortunately, it's been a hard time everywhere in the world.
Yeah, I learned a lot from that instinct. I learned to trust my gut more. I learned that it doesn't matter if I can rationally explain to someone my decision and convince them of it or not, because I don't have all the facts. But like you said, I try to research a little bit and then weigh the possibilities and just be skeptical in general of people who have abused my trust in the past. Um, So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I believe there are only very few people who are convinced that COVID is a threat to humanity. There were only a few that were convinced that it's absolute garbage. And I believe the majority is in the somewhere in the middle, who and most of them go along to get along. Um, click behavior. Just
Yeah.
I want to be accepted. I don't want to stir the pot. I don't want to raise any alarms. I'm not certain, and so I don't want to get in trouble. All these patterns that we have since childhood. You mentioned parents being authority figures and our survival being dependent on authority figures, or at least we believe that. And governments and banks do a lot to create a system in which we are dependent on them for our survival. And so that reinforces those psychological patterns that we have since childhood. But I'm interested, and I'm always optimistic when I hear about new methods for people becoming autonomous and independent. And I believe cryptocurrencies is one such possibility. It's not obvious to me yet whether that will become a global, everyday alternative to fiat currency. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Um, I was so for crypto for the longest time, and I'm still in crypto. I work around and I've been learning the NFT marketplace because as stupid as it sounded and as idiotic, like I don't even know how to say it. Yeah,
Idiotic?
you know what I'm getting at. Is it was selling JPGs of images online on the blockchain. Just sounded like the most stupidest thing in the world, you know what I mean? But I was like, this is the world we live in. The world is stupid. So I put myself in there and I've been learning it. So but originally when I first thought about it, I wanted to invest in Bitcoin back when Bitcoin was below $1. I think that's what was getting it like news and whatnot. I saw that and I was like, hey, look, a way to get rid of relying on the petrodollar, the United States dollar. It's just part of a war machine that is controlling other countries, that is political, like horrible. Just we use the dollar in a very lot of negative ways, at least my country has. But anyway, I thought it'd be a good way to get off of that. And then the World Economic Forum and all of their plans come out. And then I go, oh, okay, now I absolutely hate crypto. Now I see what you're trying to do with crypto. You're very open about it. You put your plans right out there and explained everything directly. And crypto is a means and a way that can be in its worst case situation used to control you and put you into a 15-minute city surveillance state, China type situation. And I personally, and that's why I live in the United States of America, I have rights and I refuse to allow myself to be put into that situation because I believe in my human rights and my natural rights, and I'm not harming somebody else, and so I should be able to be left alone. I should be able to live in this world and this life just like everybody else peacefully. And I try to be harmonious with nature as much as I can. I'm not trying to be destructive. I'm trying to better myself. Overall, I try to be a positive force in the end. Um, but like always, like everything, there's good and bad. I've done bad things. I've done good things, you know.
Tell me about this connection between World Economic Forum and cryptos. I sounds like you know something I don't.
Okay, the World Economic Forum and the different Davos conventions and a lot of their stuff I've downloaded and I've looked and checked their website to go see myself from seeing TikTok videos and whatnot, talking about them. But essentially the World Economic Forum wants to utilize and keep the world under, I believe it's 1 billion people, worldwide. They want to have a one world government. They're got ties to our government and almost every large government that's existed, except for Russia and a couple of other governments out there. NATO's tied to it, FEMA's tied to it, United Nations is tied to it. That's why we hear things about signing away the rights of Americans from Joe Biden by allowing FEMA to make our medical decisions, like if they're going to do forced vaccinations, forced lockdowns, exactly what we went through with COVID. Like now that they're trying to put paperwork and stuff like that in. Like I'm a free person, I want to be left alone, essentially. And so the World Economic Forum to me is just exactly what I despise. And everything that I've seen with the linkages of the people that I've researched, um, the ideologies of the World Economic Forum, the people in power who have been a part of the World Economic Forum, like Bill Gates, Justin Trudeau, Dr. Fauci, the list goes on. There's a whole bunch of them. But it seems like these are all of our bad politicians and all of our bad people in the world. And it seems like the World Economic Forum is not trying to help the world through philanthropy and society. They're trying to create their own version of it completely through the elitism of having access to resources, money, food to be able to control and direct things like COVID on to the world population and abrupt society. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're the people playing the chess game at the very top.
I'm
That's
I'm
how I feel
familiar
about them.
I'm familiar with this part, but the connection to cryptocurrency. I still am optimistic about current cryptocurrency because I think it is a decentralized form of money, and that's not true for every currency.
What did I do? Am I still here?
Yes, I can hear you. I
Oh,
see
there I am. My page disappeared. Sorry, go ahead.
Is my understanding that a lot of cryptocurrencies, not all, are decentralized and don't depend on a government or a central bank. But you're saying it's a psyop by the World Economic Forum?
It can be. It's possible they have plans to utilize it. That's what part of like the different systems in different countries that have been getting utilized by the government structures is our different cryptocurrencies and different blockchains that they've been developing so that they can tie it to the central banks, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera. We want to get away from that though. Isn't that what we don't want?
right. Yeah, yeah.
So
Ripple
so if
is such an example.
the government's controlling all the crypto markets, the government's controlling all of the IP addresses, it allows what can be sold and what cannot be sold. Eventually, crypto is not your crypto that's going to be the crypto that you wanted if they decide to ban everything and force you to use one, which is what I think a lot of people like myself are worried about. The World Economic Forum, that's what they would do. You can only use this cryptocurrency. You get this much at a time. It
Right.
expires on this day if you don't use it, keeping the herd of population in control essentially to do whatever they want them to do.
Okay, I see. That makes sense. It's just like the central bank digital currencies. And yes, crypto can be used in that way and controlled on in many areas. For example, the exchange from fiat to crypto is still very controlled and surveilled. I I guess my hope is that some cryptocurrencies, especially the privacy ones, will one day be used by everyday businesses that we buy and sell from, so that we can have our own currency niche. I don't know if that's realistic or if we can ever fully become independent currency wise.
I think it's very realistic, honestly, because a lot of people see how cryptocurrency can be negative because they start to see and they put the links and they put the associations of like the worst case scenario of, okay, if someone wanted to control me, and how would they do it? They control me by my money, what I'm
Yeah,
allowed to have access to. Well, we've already had that control put upon us for how long? Like society, you have to go to work, you have to make money unless you're born rich. Then you know what I mean? You have to go through, you have to do things in life, whether you want to or not, in society, for you to be able to just survive in general. Because not all of us were lucky enough to be taught all of the things to live out in the middle of nowhere in the woods if we wanted to, and take care of ourselves and survive. Most of us need to go make that paycheck so we have electricity, or in the middle of winter, we're going to freeze because a lot of us don't have those skills anymore because we live in a modernized technology um, type state where the electric grid has actually already caused us to be dependent on
yeah,
somebody else. The food industry has caused us to be dependent on somebody else. Our clothing industry is now dependent. Everything has gone through these marketing and these corporations started off small, but now they're big, giant monopoly type um, structures that run society in our day-to-day lives. We rely upon those things. But I do believe that people are seeing the worst case scenarios that can happen because of all of the injustices that are happening. The governments, I think, and especially after COVID and the way they forced everybody to do things when they didn't want to, the fighting, the differences of opinions on both sides, people started realizing, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe this isn't something that we want to have. So I think people are going to realize that we have to move to a digital market. But I think people are starting to kind of wake up and realize that the people who are in control of our money, for example, right now, are not the people that we want designing these markets. We need to get them out. We need to kick them out. We need to figure out what we need to do to legally get away from them as our countries and utilizing them because they're corrupted, and like look at all of the things that they've swayed with their power. Look, the money they printed for free and they've made off of us, but yet we go to jail for not paying our debt when they can just keep printing it and keep printing it and keep printing it. And it's apparently never ends. Like what is debt? What is inflation? But it
there's
turns
no
into
debt
a way
ceiling.
to control. Yeah, that's what it seems to be because right now we are moving to that transition of a digital currency. We've gotten to the point technologically where it's needed. And I think it's possible. 100%. Like I said, it's just one of those things that we won't know until it's time. We're kind of in that war right now. Who's going to come out on top? Kind of like the .com era. Well, Jeff came out on top. Bill came out on top. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like those were the geeks and the nerds who knew the digital side of things that everybody laughed at. Said you're never going to make it. And now they're the richest people in the world and they're controlling and having controlling interests in companies and literally molding and shaping things like our pharmaceuticals and our food. And we're becoming more and more reliant upon, once again, somebody who has all this power. And it's it's so complicated.
it
It
sounds.
never ends. It could
I,
be a good thing or a bad thing, and we're just gonna have to find out. And I really hope that it's a good thing in the end.
yeah, I think all these negative things that you mentioned could make someone pessimistic. But what can you do maybe spiritually or psychologically to stay sane, to keep faith in having at least some control over your life?
Continue to research and make sure that you're questioning things and learn more and more and make your own determinations and be able to not rely on other people for information and go, no, logically that don't make sense. Well,
Yeah,
that's false information, or that's information that's meant to be swayed towards me for a political purpose, for me to be associating with the Democrats or for me to be associating with the Republicans, for me to bicker and fight between the red and the blue in the United States, of example. That's just like one example. To be able to look at information because everybody's information is going to affect us subconsciously. Whether we realize it or not, we're absorbing that information subconsciously that's in our brain. We're reacting upon it, it gets utilized. We don't know exactly how it gets used, but that's why I'm very mindful of the information that I take in with like my TV shows and whatnot. I don't just mindlessly watch TV. I usually watch learning things so that I can train myself to learn more information. And I'll randomly pop off with information. I don't know how I know the information, but it's because I've been there subconsciously. I was zoned in, paying attention, and I was making memories in my brain. I just wasn't accessing them per se. So I
Yeah.
think all of the doom and gloom is very, very horrible, and it can be a lot of pessimism that goes on with it, which is why I think that everybody should hope for the better and to not look at the doom and gloom, because I think that the brain's powerful, and the more people that you get together aiming towards one goal, believing in one goal spiritually, praying for, as you said, or psychologically, using the power of our brains that we don't understand, but grouping people together, having the willpower to have one outcome. I think that's what shapes our actual civilization in our world, is the group collectiveness and consciousness. And we just haven't been teaching as a group collectiveness. We've been taught a bunch of things that we don't need to know. Our life is not like, I feel like this isn't what life is supposed to be. Like I sit here and I go, this is not what life was 500 years ago. This is not what's supposed to be happening. I should be outside. I should be working in nature. I
Mhm.
should be helping out my friends, my family. I should be working together to survive and find a harmonious balance for myself and my existence on the world that I live in. And instead, I live in this digital age that I'm very addicted to, don't get me wrong, and I love it. But this isn't life. This isn't what I'm meant to be doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I also always try to encourage people to do their own research and to not rely on me or any source, to just be told what to believe and what to do.
Hmm.
Um, you said you're optimistic about the trend that more and more people are becoming self-sufficient, at least, mentally, and are waking up, you might say, and are less and less like sheep. I thought 50% is a bit optimistic, but I don't know what the real number is. This is another problem. We just believe that what the lies you see on television are believed by the majority of the people,
Hmm.
and and then you might totally miss out on an opportunity of talking to your neighbor about something that you actually agree on. And that could help you with your independence.
Yeah, the division and the divisiveness that's intentionally put on the TV and the political weaponization of different things. I think for at least 8 years, if not longer, I think that our government has been doing psychological operations through news media, the outlets, and TV, especially when Obama's administration came in. He had changed some things that allowed some things to happen that really set up for all the disinformation and the scare tactics and the fear tactics to be had, especially during COVID. Because, like I said, there was a lot and a lot and a lot of retractions, but this was headline news. Everybody's talking about it for 6 months. And then 7 months later, they retract it, saying it's not true. Like the effects of what they did and what had happened are there. It's done. It's swayed the outcome of what would have originally happened because of the information that they put out there. And that's why I say I truly think that it is weaponized in its own sense. And that's why I just tell people, it's like I watch the news, and if I see that they're plastering something about somebody like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, I go and I start researching and figuring out what bills are going through Congress, trying to find out what's being covered up and what's hidden. And every single
Yeah.
time I find something, every single time. And that's a pattern that I can't ignore. That, oh, they spam the media with one thing, distractions, while this and this and this and this are happening. Kind of like the TikTok bill that they tried to slide under the table for and blame China. Oh, disinformation. Well, no, it affects every um,
So,
interaction that we have, including a virtual private network access use, and
mhm.
limits us and restricts us from that. And that's what this is really about. Had nothing to do with the data or anything from China, but that's all that the news is talking about. That's all that Congress is talking about. That's all that all these different people are talking about. But no one would talk about the issue of, hey, what do you mean I can't use a VPN? Am I not allowed to have my privacy? What do you mean that if you don't want me to go somewhere or see something, you're going to not let me see it? Excuse me, I have the access to information. This is why I have the freedoms that I have. And sliding it in while distracting people seems to be a tactic that's been happening a lot in the last 8 to 12 years for sure, that I can't ignore.
But for my final question, I want to get into the theme of the podcast overall, and that is trying to find out who I am, or hopefully my listeners are doing the same. And so, what has all this chaos in the world and your experience with mental illness, how has that helped you to learn more about who you are at the core?
I haven't. I'm still learning. I'm still searching every day. Uh, I know that I'm a good person, and I've known this since I was a kid. Kind of like the gut feeling that you said you're going with more like I'm an empath because of just my subconscious reactions and my body's behavior. It's like I know when someone's upset. I subconsciously read their body language. It's like, oh, your body is telling me that you are miserable, you are horrible, and I should avoid you because you're probably going to snap at me. I don't like to be snapped at because of the loud sounds, and so I'll freak out and have anxiety and have to be stunned like they're sitting here not knowing what to do, going, are you done yelling at me yet? Please walk away. But just being stuck. And so I don't know who I am except for that I'm trying to be the opposite of what the majority of people do. It seems like I'm kind of a, a balancer, if that makes sense. There's yin and yang, and I feel like the world is off, even though I know that it's not, it can't be. It has to be balanced in its own ways. But I see the negative more than I see the positive. So I try to maintain and be positive and show the positive to encourage positivity, to encourage critical thought, things like that, to help individual people grow and better themselves, especially with when it comes to mental health and whatnot. I know we talked a lot about COVID and a lot of touchy subjects and whatnot, but overall, the introspection of myself is something that I don't think I'll ever have the answers to. And I truly believe that I can't understand. I won't have the answers, but I still have a need or a drive to go find them. And so I'm just constantly learning every day. And if I ever find the answer of who am I, what does life mean? What is existence? What is the universe? Which is why I love having these conversations overall for the most part. Um, I'll be very surprised. So, but until then, I just keep searching and I just keep trying to do the opposite of what I see. And right now, constantly for years and years, I've seen the negative side of the world, the horrible atrocities, the things that shouldn't be happening, you know. We just want to live peacefully in our life, and I wish we were able to do that. And unfortunately, in some places, it's not possible.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Arisendead.
Yo, thank you. I appreciate being on the cast.